Vladimir Putin is re-elected as Russia's president in a landslide victory dubbed neither free nor fair.
New deepfakes could be considered an EU-wide crime as early as April, as the first ever directive on violence against women goes through a final stage of approval.
Spanish farmers continue protests despite EU concessions.
Montenegro's new government is building momentum towards joining the EU, the country's Europe minister told Euronews.
Vladimir Putin has won a fifth term as president in a landslide election victory. Russia's number one faced no credible opposition candidates amid a ruthless crackdown on dissident and critical voices. Russian election officials said Putin, who will now serve another 6-year term, won more than 87% of the vote. In his victory speech, he vowed to press on with the war in Ukraine and strengthen Russia's army.
Вы можете мне поверить, можете нет. Человек, который со мной говорил, еще фразу не закончил. Я сказал, я согласен. Но, к сожалению, вот случилось то, что случилось. Только при одном условии сказал, что мы его поменяем, чтобы он не возвращался, пускай там сидит. Вот и все. Но это случается. Ничего здесь с этим не поделаешь.
Turnout was estimated at 74%, setting a record for highest attendance and highest ever Putin presidential rating. Western leaders condemned the vote as neither fair nor free. The first day of voting was marred by acts of vandalism, including arson attacks on polling stations. Symbolic protests were held abroad and in several Russian cities. In Moscow, the late Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny was honored at his grave. People brought flowers, candles, and voting slips with his name written on them. Putin's fiercest political foe died in an Arctic prison last month.
New deepfakes are one step closer to being considered an EU-wide crime, as the first ever directive on violence against women will go through a final stage of approval in April.
So they're finding the images from anywhere and everywhere. So it could be from your Instagram account, your Facebook account, your WhatsApp profile picture.
And it's important to state that these synthetic stripping tools do not work on men. They are explicitly designed to target women. So it's a good example of a technology which is explicitly malicious, right? There's nothing neutral about that.
Victims of explicit deepfakes in Europe currently have to rely on a patchwork of laws. Once they see these nude fake images with their faces online, they are advised to take a screenshot or a video recording of the content and use it to report to the social media platform and law enforcement.
Unfortunately, cybersecurity can't help you much here, because it's all a question of dismantling the dissemination network and removing that content altogether.
With this new agreement, all 27 member states will have the same set of laws to criminalise the most widespread forms of cyber violence. However, this might not be enough to respond to a global trend.
The problem is that you might have a victim who is situated in Brussels. You've got the perpetrator who is in California in the US, and you've got the server which is holding the content in maybe, let's say, Ireland. So it becomes a global problem, because you're dealing with different countries.
Well, what needs to be done, of course, in parallel with the directive, is that we need to increase the cooperation with other countries, with other regions, because that's the only way we can also combat crime that do not see any boundaries. But unfortunately, the AI technology is developing very fast, which means that also our legislation needs to keep up. So we would need to revise the directive in this soon. So it is important step for the current state, but we will need to keep up with the development of AI.
Spanish farmers have protested in Madrid despite EU concessions on its Green Deal. Protesters claim EU policies continue to make their produce uncompetitive and straddle small farms with bureaucracy. Organisers claimed as many as 1,000 farmers joined in the protest.
Que el consumidor se sume a nosotros y se dé una imagen de unidad de la sociedad, porque al final todo lo que estamos pidiendo en el campo se resume en la cesta de la compra.
Farmers in Poland also joined the protest, blocking a key highway leading from Poland into Germany. Brussels has offered to make concessions on its agricultural policies that were originally aimed at environmental protection. But farmers continue to say these are not enough and argue that policies could ruin their business.
Montenegro's new government is building momentum towards joining the EU, the country's Europe minister told Euronews. Majda Gorsevic said there are encouraging signs across the political spectrum in Montenegro, which has started much of the work required to join the EU. It's one of the most likely next members of the bloc.
We are having new momentum, we are having new energy with the new government, and this is the first time after a couple of years that we are having also this political stability when it comes also consensus over European integration. So at this moment, in the first 100 days of the government, we showed that we had open dialogue, not only with the political majority, but also with the opposition when it comes to European path.
Despite progress made by some Western Balkan countries like North Macedonia and Albania, challenges persist, including unresolved issues such as the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue and the need for structural reforms.
Compared to other countries, we have also some additional hurdles, which makes it more difficult for us in this race that is supposed to be equal. We are the only country that still doesn't have the candidate status. We still are struggling with the recognition from 5 members of the EU.
While EU politicians have expressed support for enlargement, including initiatives like the new growth plan for the Western Balkans, questions remain regarding the direction of travel.
With the region of Western Balkan being outside of the European Union, and I'm not sure if on a long term EU, not the Western Balkans only, but EU can afford this.
The European Commission has recommended opening EU accession talks with Bosnia and Herzegovina 8 years after it applied to be a member. The Commission's request is expected to be approved at the EU summit in Brussels this week.
A new volcano eruption began near Iceland's Grindavik at midnight. Fiery lava flows off the fissure, assessed to be 3 kilometers long. A series of about 80 minor earthquakes preceded. A state of emergency has been declared in southern Iceland. Grindavik's inhabitants had to be evacuated once again. The previous eruption took place in early February. Three mountain climbers who were stranded on the Italian Alps were rescued by the nation's fire and rescue service. They were stuck in an icy gully at 2,300 meters in Piedmont, a region in the northwest of Italy. Rescuers were winched off a helicopter and proceeded to climb the mountain using pickaxes to reach the trapped individuals. The Saloniki, the second largest city in Greece, is hosting the 26th edition of International Documentary Festival. This year's main tribute, titled Citizen Queer, contained a large number of LGBTQI+ documentaries. The 26th Saloniki Film Festival kicked off with the film They Shot the Piano Players by Fernando Trueba, who also received the honorary Golden Alexander for his lifetime contribution to cinema.
Τα τελευταία χρόνια το Φεστιβάλ Ντοκιμαντέρ Θεσσαλονίκης όντως έχει γίνει ένα από τα πιο σημαντικά φεστιβάλ ντοκιμαντέρ στην Ευρώπη. Και γι' αυτό φέτος είχαμε 120 πρεμιέρες το οποίο δείχνει και την εμπιστοσύνη που έχουν πια οι σκηνοθέτες, η παραγωγή, οι sales agent στο φεστιβάλ μας, διότι ξέρουν ότι θα έρθουν εδώ και η ταινία τους θα βρει ένα καταπληκτικό κοινό. Όποιος πάρει το Χρυσό Αλέξανδρο είναι αυτομάτως επιλέξιμος για το βραβείο Oscar Documentaire, αλλά και διότι θα δει όλη την κοινότητα, την επαγγελματική κοινότητα του ντοκιμαντέρ του κόσμου και η ταινία του θα έχει σίγουρα μια καλή πορεία αν ξεκινήσει από το φεστιβάλ Θεσσαλονίκης.
One of the documentaries presented was My Stolen Planet by Farana Sharifi, in which she features archive footage showing life in Iran before the 1979 revolution. The director remains in Germany because she can no longer return to Iran. The producer of the film explains to Euronews that the death of Mahsa Amini affected the director.
It's a very personal film. She filmed everything that was around her because as a woman you don't have the right to go out on the streets and film whatever you want. You need to film what you have around you. So it was her private life, her friends and her family. But then eventually with everything that happens after Mahsa Amini's death, made her change the structure, and then it became a diary of the 45 years of oppression of women's rights in Iran.
The Saloniki Documentary Festival ends on Sunday, March 17th.
Το Φεστιβάλ Ντοκιμαντέρ Θεσσαλονίκης φιλοξενεί κάθε χρόνο την αφρόκρεμα των ταινιών τεκμηρίωσης από όλο τον κόσμο. Φέτος, στις 11 μέρες της διοργάνωσης, προβάλλονται συνολικά 250 ντοκιμαντέρ που έχουν να κάνουν με ιδιαίτερα κρίσιμα, επίκαιρα ζητήματα που απασχολούν όλο τον πλανήτη. Πάνω από 200 σκηνοθέτες, Έλληνες και ξένοι, δίνουν ραντεβού σε αυτό το πληθωρικό φεστιβάλ. Γιώργος Μητρόπουλος από τη Θεσσαλονίκη για το Euronews.